Welcome everyone to the advisory ecosystem. So glad you could join. And as Kocher kind of pointed out, today is a new phase in the evolution of the advisory ecosystem. We're very excited about today because we're going to be introducing this concept of the collaborative work group. And as you know, being community members, all of the innovation that comes from this community is kind of member driven. One thing we've heard again and again from members is we love the sessions, we love the topics. We'd like to now be able to take a topic and kind of drill down on it and work together and iterate amongst ourselves and frankly bring some of that innovation back into our company. So that was the inspiration behind the collaborative work group, and we're teeing that off today. So thank you, members, for your ideas, and hopefully you see that we always act on this, this feedback in terms of our format. So today we're going to tee up our first work group, collaborative work group in the customer success track. And we're going to profile this research. We're lucky to have as a community member, Bain and Company. And so many of the members are excited by this research that's been done on B2B, elements of value. So we're going to introduce that as a bit of a primer for everybody. Then we're going to move through with the help of our lead, our chair, Dave. We're going to go through a discussion of how do we look at these elements of value in our own business and how do we operationalize them. And then finally, at the end, we'll have a little bit of a call to action, if you will, on those that are really inspired by this conversation and intrigued by some of the ideas, that if they do want to join this collaborative work group going forward, please, that's something we'll let you opt into in terms of format. So that's kind of our structure for today. Let me go ahead and introduce our folks and some of the folks that will be leading us through. So current member of the community, and grateful to have him, is Jamie Cleghorn. Jamie is the lead of the business-to-business commercial practice for Bain in the Americas. Also one of the authors to this research everyone's so excited by, the B2B elements of value. And so Jamie is both a current member of the community, also a thought leader on these elements of value. His colleague, Eric Almquist here is with us as well, which is exciting. And we're gonna have Jamie kind of introduce himself a little bit and walk you through a little of the key insights from the research Bain did on elements of value. And then we'll come back and introduce our chair. So with that, I'll let Jamie take over.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so okay, good. So this is Jamie Cleghorn. I'm a partner with Bain in Chicago. I spend all my time with B2B companies and all of that time on growth issues. A lot of Salesforce effectiveness, but a lot of go-to-market strategy and even just sort of value proposition strategy, offer strategy, and growth strategy. So the whole growth value chain, the whole revenue value chain, if you will. Chad introduced Eric. Eric is my colleague. I'm proud to call him a colleague. He is really one of the best thinkers in the world on customer insight, customer value. He's spent more years doing this than some of us have been alive. So he's really as good as they come. Eric is a PhD economic historian. Is that right, Eric?
Anthropology, but a lot of economic history.
Okay, got it. But he deeply understands why human beings do the things they do when it comes to buying things, and so he developed a piece of work around consumers, B2C. And really based, for those who don't know, and it was actually out in Fortune today, that one metric that won't go away at the C-suite of Fortune 500 is NPS. And that's something Bain invented in 2003 with our colleagues Rob Markey and Fred Reichheld. And in some ways, you can think of this as the double click on NPS. The beauty of NPS is it's a wonderfully simple metric that says it's predictive of future revenue growth. Would you recommend it? Therefore, is this product going to grow? It does not do a great job of answering the why. And that's what elements of value really does. It answers the why in a much more rigorous and insightful way. And so I collaborated with Eric to build round 2 of elements of value, which is B2B focused. And we believe, because the research tells us, that, you know, there are 40 elements of value. And I like to think of them as Legos, if you will, right? So if you grew up with Legos like I did before there was a design and you had to assemble it perfectly to what looked on the box, but you just sort of had all these different colors and shapes of Legos and you could build whatever you wanted out of them. You know, that's really what the elements of value are. There are 40 things that B2B customers care about, period, full stop. And you can combine them in any way you want to get to a value prop, as long as it hunts in the marketplace, and it needs to hunt better than your competitors' value prop hunts. And so that's where it is. The framework, I think some of you have read it. It's oriented from more objective, hard metric measurable things on the bottom to things that are more subjective on the top. And that's actually one of the reasons we built the pyramid, is because it gives us a way to put hard quantification around those things that are a little bit squishier. And you know, one of the insights of behavioral economics was that people did things that were economically irrational. And we would argue that no, they're perfectly rational. They're just valuing different things than the simple dollars and cents of things. There's other things that they value. And I think as salespeople, as go-to-market professionals, we all know that. We've all closed deals on things like that. But there are things that move up. Sorry, if you could go back one step, Kocher. So it starts at the bottom with economic performance, and then moves into this ease of doing business layer, then ultimately moves past that to the individual layer, which thinks about the buyer as a person for their career and their personal benefit. And then beyond that, inspirational value, which you can think of as sort of social good or transcendent value. So, you know, why is this important? It's predictive. And if you go, now you can go to the next slide, Kocher. It's predictive of NPS, right? So it's highly correlated with NPS. NPS itself is highly correlated with revenue growth, and elements of value itself is correlated with future purchase intent. Is how we did it here. And we've proved it out many times. Harder to do B2B research, as you all know. This is a law that holds, that the more elements of value you provide, the more likely you are to get future revenue growth. And so that's the framework in a nutshell. I'm trying to think, are we going to one more slide after this, Kocher? So here's the framework. So you can see at the bottom, so we talk about table stakes, which are, you know, literally the things you have to get to the table. And then you get to the functional elements, the economic or performance. I like to think of this as price and speeds and feeds, which is the basis on which B2B commerce has existed for a long time. And then moves into that ease of doing business layer. So productivity improvements, operational improvements, access, relationship, strategic. These are all those sort of softer, intangible things that are hard to quantify, but, you know, ecosystems does a great job in the value management office of putting dollars and cents against those. And then you get into those individual elements. You know, how do you help people's careers? How do you give them things that appeal to them themselves? So here are the Legos. I know there's been a lot of interest with these. We've done many projects with this and had many really interesting executive conversations around the world. There are a few types of people that really like this framework: CEOs, marketers, strategists, customer success people. And so hopefully we can have a really good workshop on this today. You know, maybe before we jump in, just in the spirit of getting the conversation going, has anybody had a chance to sort of apply this to their business, either in a formal or informal way? I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay, perfect, good. Well, we're plowing new ground here, which is great.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, George. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I couldn't get unmuted. You know what I did apply it for. I was CTO for managed service provider for about 5 years. I was actually applying it when going in to meet with clients, for example. So what I did was, the customer success team was reporting to me. So oftentimes what we did was, if there was a situation, let's say there was a hot client, I was trying to figure out which one of these buttons we needed to address, right? So there would probably be something on the quality of the service, right? You know, on the performance, but then there was also always some kind of component around the reputation. Like, hey, I brought you guys here and you guys aren't performing, so this is really impacting my reputation. So by identifying before we went to meet with these folks, we could better prepare, right? We knew what we needed to start talking with, right? I always led with look, we're here to protect your reputation. You had faith in us and so on. Conversely, when we went in and we knew this was going to be a very good meeting, we wanted to highlight, hey, don't forget, you brought us in. You got rid of the other provider, and we've done this, and this is, you really had a positive impact, and this is where the positive impact has been. And then try and identify what other areas we could go into. So yes, I've applied it in the past, and in general, I try taking a look at the pyramid every time I'm going to have a meeting, whether it's positive, negative, or tense, just because it puts me in that frame of mind.
I love that. I love that, George. I've heard similar stories of that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Someone else want to jump in?
Yeah, Jamie, this is Abhi Ingley from AT&T. I've never applied it formally in this format, but when we were introducing how mobile services with SaaS, right, mobile devices with SaaS can completely just change the way a workflow or a particular task is performed, we actually had a framework which laid out, if you eliminated steps, reduced effort, time savings, and we actually had little clocks showing in the specific business process that we were targeting, which components were being targeted. I would argue that most of them were on the functional and ease of doing business elements.
Yeah.
We rarely went into what I'll call individual illustrational elements. So this is actually a very holistic framework beyond what I think we focus on the first three parts of the pyramid, not the top two for the most part.
Yeah, that's great. I love talking about Salesforce as an example here, because they built so many of these into their business model from day zero. They have a good product that works, and they actually aren't low price, right? As we all know. And they do a lot of these easy doing business things well, but they're a double bottom line business where they just sort of have a structured give back to charity as part of their profits, and always have, that hits you right at the top of the pyramid. And if you think about Dreamforce, that's all about that individual layer, right? I mean, there's not a lot of people who walk out of Dreamforce. There's not a lot of people who fly to San Francisco and pay for the hotels because they want to learn how to do workflow and CRM better. I mean, that's part of it, right? But sort of everything else that's part of it, it helps their marketability and their reputational assurance. It builds their network. It helps them grow, and there's fun, right? Bono performing doesn't have a lot to do with Marketing Cloud. But it has a lot to do with fun. And so, I mean, that's just an example of a company that naturally got this. And I think if you watch your best sellers, they've got their EQ dialed in, they know their products well enough. They're naturally hitting on a lot of these things in their communication. But to George's point, not all of us have that EQ that's dialed up to 11 and sort of have that 360-degree view of the playing field. And so this can be a really good aid as you go in. Because this is all the things people care about. It's all right here in one place, and you can very quickly figure out whether it's a product strategy, whether it's a sales pitch, whether it's customer success. These are the things that customers actually experience, and so these are the things we should be focused on delivering.
Jamie, this is Doug May from Databricks. We've applied this in the past, actually, to the way we coach and train salespeople and sales teams. I've spent my career in kind of startup and high growth. Sure. B2B technology. And of course, economic value makes a lot of sense to a certain persona in the organization, right? Those that are going to do the financial approvals and prioritization. But, understanding the win for your champion has a lot to do with potentially those individual elements. If the message gets up to a senior leadership team, it's how do you align to what inspires them? And how do you connect all those points? So these are the soft skills of selling, I think, that help to play to the other value types as you go through there. So that's how we've tried to do it. Yeah,
I love that. We just we're working with a high growth $1 billion SaaS company right now. And we've explicitly designed their go-to-market around different types of wins: the business win, the relationship win, the technical win, and each of those are going to hit different things on the value pyramid. It's a great insight, Doug.
Hi, this is Sugata Dev from National Instruments. So one of the things, we actually used this originally on our customer success case studies to figure out, and then we didn't have as good a structure as what you have, but we had the elements of it in there. And then we used that to essentially run our value messaging and our value positioning on the front end. Right, so there's a flow back from understanding where your customers generated value first, so that you have a grounding And it also gives you the case studies when somebody says, okay, give me an example of this. And then, right, you have that. And then we realized we were leaving so much value on the table from our sales side of the whole equation, because we were talking more at the bottom of the pyramid rather than the middle and the top. And that is what transitioned our entire sales motions. We built a value selling, consulting out of this whole thing, realizing that we needed to support sales and customers who wanted to go in. So it was sort of a full cycle, but it started on the back end of the customer success first, and then now is leading all our go-to-market and how we engage with customers.
Awesome. Well, that might be a perfect segue to the next slide. And David, I think you were going to present. Well, I'll let David introduce himself and then go to that next slide. Well, but that's great. That's great. So got it.
Yeah. Let me introduce. This is Chad. So I love first, Jamie. Thank you so much for the overview. So in summary, we've got these great 36 value Legos. The more Legos we snap on, the higher it equates to loyalty and repeat purchase. And I always love our group, our community. So we open up a question and we get immediately George, Abhi, Doug, and Sagadu. Thank you guys for kind of level setting on your understanding. What I want to do is introduce our new chair, newly minted chair, if you will, for the customer success track, Dave Kocher. I've known Dave for years. One of the most progressive, innovative thinkers in customer success, I think, today. He was kind of implementing concepts of pre-sales outcomes and post-sales outcome delivery before it was even so fashionable as it is today. So very progressive, very innovative. He leads the whole customer engagement globally for Medidata Solutions, both the strategy and execution. And so just grateful for him to chair us in this session. And I'll turn it over to Dave.
Hey, thanks, Chad. Appreciate that. Really excited to be here and honored to serve as this newly minted chair. I think for me, it's predominantly because this community is special. Well, one of the things I know about customer success practitioners is that we're open and willing to help. We've already seen that here so far. And I think there's that common understanding that says we get further faster by collaborating and sharing. And I think that's the opportunity and chance we have in this group. And that's why I'm excited about it. And it's also why, from me, it's self-serving. I get a chance to learn and listen from each of you all during these sessions and get deeper into the conversations to see what you're doing, how you're driving value in your businesses. And that, for me, is exciting, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. And as I think about the topic for today, this ability to operationalize B2B elements of value, it's been extremely exciting research from the beginning. The first time I heard about it, I was just captivated. It gives us a structured approach for value beyond the typical cost, revenue, or ROI, those things that we see closer to the bottom of the pyramid, and just rounds it out. However, to be candid, I've been stuck. I saw the research, I got excited about it, and I haven't been able to make meaningful progress in a consistent way for myself or my team. And I just seem to run the questions through my mind. How do I get started? Where do I begin? What do I do first? How much of it do I have to do for it to bring impact or value? And so it leads me to no action. And so what I'm excited about for this conversation today is to hear about how you all are taking action. And so we're going to go through a couple of different questions just to spur the conversation along. And please, it very much is an opportunity for you all to share what's happening in your world. And where I'd love to start is we find ourselves in really interesting. Oh, sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
I would just make one point. You're not alone. And we actually saw this with NPS early on in the early days. It was like this magic metric, and people were like, great, now what? And so we had to go from the NPS metric to the NPS system. And how do you create that inner feedback loop and that outer feedback loop, and how do you drive continuous improvement into your value proposition and in your operations and all of those things? So, you know, Eric and I are diligently working on this, but in some ways, you can think of elements of value as like source code or computer code. It's like, okay, great, you've discovered Java. Now what? And so, you know, figuring out the application use cases and making the UI easy and intuitive and all that, that's exactly the journey we've been on as Bain & Company. And we're super excited that A, you guys are experiencing actually what everyone else is experiencing, and B, that you're leading the conversation here today to solve, sort of drive more usability into it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jamie. And one of the immediate ties I wanted to make for a jumping off point is around the space we find ourselves in. COVID-19, this pandemic has changed our worlds from where we're working to who we're able to see on a regular basis. And it's affected our relationships with our customers. How close in proximity are we, or how we used to be? And I think it gives us a bit of a guide around how we can understand better the challenges our customers are facing, the empathy that we can bring to those conversations, and the highlights of these 6 specific values that are important and critical during this time as we engage with our customers and our colleagues. And I'd love to hear what you all have seen. What's working, what's not working, what have you stopped doing, what have you started doing as a result of the COVID pandemic to engage with customers and help to take advantage of or leverage these elements of value?
I'll go. This is Avi. We've actually tried to hit a lot of these areas depending on the segment we're going after. Okay. So clearly, from the perspective of the fact that AT&T runs FirstNet, which is the first responder network, we've communicated that it's our time to serve and not just sell, from the providing the stable network for meeting the social need, the social responsibility that we have to the nation to keep it running. We've signed the Keep America Connected pledge, right? And we have communicated through various articles, both from the PR side and from the advertising side, the fact that we're available, our network is handling everything appropriately. We've released facts and stats around that. And obviously we've communicated in the financial press the fact that we have the cash to operate despite the significant pressure that we are under along those dimensions. And we've been also communicating with customers about our flexibility in potentially lengthening out payment terms, extending contracts, so on and so forth. So I would say we have hit every one of these things in a very systemic manner with a slightly different approach for each customer segment. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. And as I heard you talking, I just saw it pinging on the different elements that were there. I heard availability, reduced anxiety, stability. Those came up in the comments of what you're doing and how they align. So thank you for sharing. Absolutely. How about others?
This is Shek. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Shek Data. I run value engineering for a company called Kariba, which is in the treasury management space. We actually like to call it active liquidity network. And what we've been doing during this pandemic period is actually develop a framework around helping customers really understand what risk and threat they're exposed to. So we've developed this risk and threat matrix, if you will, to really help them, understand in times of crisis, what's important really short term is liquidity. So we've been looking at, 8 elements, that we've structured to help customers self-assess where they may have vulnerabilities. And those cross the elements of value, I think, in a very systematic way. Namely, we're looking at it from a business continuity standpoint, looking at various components like what's the human resource impact. You're moving to a new era where you're working remotely, but also do you actually have the expertise on staff within your finance organization to actually be doing some strategic thinking. When you have a major crisis, people are no longer just pulling reports. You have to be kind of more on the ad hoc side, right? Generating ad hoc reports because conditions are changing rapidly. So, we did things like that. We look at, what are your processes today, internal processes and tools, what is the perimeter of your liquidity? Because if you look at treasury, it's just usually just cash and positioning and forecasting. But when we talk about liquidity, it's cash plus, if you will. So we're looking at working capital component, risk management, and all of these, are hitting, if you will, on many of the dimensions that are highlighted in the in your framework. Later on, I have a question: is how do you actually go about at Bain's operationalizing this framework, right, and collecting the baseline information to be able to assess for a particular organization you're working with? What are the the key elements that you really need to focus on based on your strategic objectives? So in other words, is it done through kind of conversations? Do you have a formal mechanism and intellectual properties and tools that will help you kind of gather the information rapidly and then later on engage with the customer to do validation and really operationalize your findings and recommendations?
Yeah, Shek, I think you're reading our minds on where we're headed in this conversation, and so we definitely want to get in there. Just wanted to see if there's another comment on COVID-19 and the elements of value before we jump into some of the other questions, one of which specifically is that check around operationalizing.
Hey, David, it's Morris.
Hey, Morris.
Good to see you again, and I hope you're all well. This is maybe a contrarian view, which is you and I and Chad have been a little bit closer to this recently. I think this always begs the question, for which customer, for which six? And what I mean by that is, when I look at this, when you go all the way to the top, I think there's a lot of customers that may want hope in a time of crisis. And giving them hope in some way may be as valuable as being socially responsible. When I go down to relationship, I think, as we all know, there's a variety of bad and good data about what's working and not. So expertise can be of value in a trust relationship to move a client or a relationship ahead and prevent stalling, whether it's your own expertise or partnering with others who bring in expertise as a value add. So I don't have any quibble with these specific, but I can see how we're continually challenged with the dynamic nature of both the client's needs and which value elements our relationship or our activity loads up on.
It's a great point. In the when you say the COVID crisis, I think you immediately have to ask, well, which phase of the COVID crisis? Are we talking about week 2, week 11, week 73, right? I mean, I think our needs are evolving pretty dynamically, very dynamically, actually. So it's a great point, Morris. And it really matters by person as well. I mean, you'll see that, I think, in the next slide. But when you think about, I forget who started the conversation on this, but once you get the CFO might care about the TCO, but someone else might care about something else, and someone else might care about something else. And so really dialing in the value amplification at a stakeholder level is pretty important.
I had one more thing to add. Oh, sorry.
Sure, please.
Hi, I'm Natalie Turner with Adobe. I came here on behalf of Caroline Ruggiero, who was unable to attend. And I wanted to also call out with this, just in looking at these 6 elements, not only ensuring that you're able to have the the EQ with your customers, but also within your organization amongst your employees also makes a huge difference. I know at Adobe, they've been really great at ensuring that we're all doing okay, so that we can then have that reduced anxiety and be available for our customers as well. And that's been a huge game changer for me, being newer to the company and just having that stability within my role as well, so that I can, have these conversations and have a better understanding of what our customers are dealing with. So that's made a huge difference.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And I'll just add one here around something that's not working, and a little bit of a shame on me example. So for those of you that don't know, I'm relatively new at Medidata Solutions. I started there at the beginning of the year, and as I've been getting going, there are a few things we knew we had to do really quickly and are at a foundational level. One of those was to build out a holistic voice of customer program. It didn't exist. We weren't doing NPS research. We didn't have that metric that's so valuable. And so for the first few months, I've been running to get that ready. And we launched right in the middle of COVID. And then we realized, oh man, how tone deaf are we that we've launched an NPS survey in the middle of a pandemic because we were heads down focused on the timeline that we'd set at the beginning of the year for getting this going. And I'll tell you, if you want to find what abysmal response rates look like, it is launch an NPS survey in the middle of a pandemic. So that's a little bit shame on me. I should have known better.
It'll be interesting to see what your NPS baseline score is now.
You know what's interesting, Jamie, is it's definitely not statistically significant. We haven't had enough responses.
N equals 3?
But we're doing relatively well given the people that have responded. Yeah.
You're raving fans. That's nice.
Yeah, perfect. How about we jump to the next slide? Keep the conversation going. Excellent. So one of the questions that came up as we were discussing this was around creating alignment across different functional silos. I mean, one of the things that's tricky about the 40 elements of value, one, there's 40 of them, and two, that it impacts so many different portions of the organization, and the communication and handoffs that have to happen can be difficult. So let's jump to the next slide. And the team at Bain has developed some additional thinking around this with the concept of elements of value being a golden thread that can connect all the way across these different functional silos, from defining strategy to creating new offers to defining products, getting it out there, the go-to-market plays, and then how do we continue to maintain, track, enable that value through the customer success process. And I think part of what is challenging here is that it is so many groups. I'd love to hear thoughts from this community on how you have overcome those handoffs between functional silos or the communication that's necessary to enable something as broad reaching as this. I'll open it back up. Well, actually, before I do that, apologies. Jamie, anything else you'd like to add, or Eric on this particular slide, things you'd like to highlight before we jump into the question?
I think you laid out the problem statement really well. It's the handoff. I mean, I was talking to Gainsight about customer success, and they said, yeah, the real problem is we don't know what the customer got promised. And so, you know, it's like there was some definition of success that was set ambiguously, and now we catch a customer without that definition, and we just need to make them happy. And so, you know, with sort of the need for the golden thread gets validated over and over, but the challenge is real, pervasive, and hard.
Yeah, thanks.
I would just add, this is Eric, I would just add that it is the handoff, but it's not only just about communications. It's actually about what types of value all of these different people are seeking. And, you know, I think that you have to have a conversation about that. Ultimately, hopefully you can gather data through ecosystems on that, for example. But it's, you know, what these different types of people value can be quite different. If you just take, for example, risk reduction or reputational assurance, you know, kind of the farther you go down the hierarchy in an organization, typically the higher the need is there, that people, you know, are worried about their careers, want to impress their superiors, and so forth.
Thanks, Eric. Perfect. So with that, let's jump in, please. What are you all seeing that works to try and create that connective tissue?
Hi, this is Sugata Dev from National Instruments again. So this has been sort of the cornerstone of how do you build consensus in a B2B organization around change, right? There's lots of studies from Gartner, and I'm sure Bain has done, you know, there are 6.5 or 6.8 individual points of view. There's lots of research on the problem. There's not much research on the solution. the ones that we found was, can we simplify the buying process inside the customer's organization into, instead of taking the titles of the people, can we talk about who's going to be investing in doing the work, who's going to be the internal customer, who's going to be consuming the output of it, and who's the funding group inside the organization. And to me, these are the three generic personas or people that need to align to get change off and running. And each one comes with a different risk reward profile that they're looking for, right? And they're often in conflict because the funding agency wants to improve the margin and give the least amount of money to any project so that they can improve the margin of the product or program that they're running. The consumers on the other end want something that will last forever, whether it's a factory looking at, these assets need to last 20, 30 years in aerospace. The group in the middle doing the work often is how quickly can you do it, and can you really do it within the funds you've been given? And we struggled with this, each one coming together. The solution that we eventually found on this was we've got to get each one of these stakeholders to back off a little bit from their position. And to do that, we would try and align with the corporate level initiatives, go look at what they're telling, the market. If they're trying to improve their market position, or if they're trying to improve their margins, take a corporate level goal or initiative that they're already running across their entire company and try to align the initiative around that. And that gave us a little bit of leverage to get these three groups together. And often that was the best thing that I could do to kind of get the mindsets together and find an executive sponsor who can see the bigger picture, who can see one stakeholder group may be losing a little in this, some other group might be benefiting, but overall the company comes out ahead. So that's, it's a hard struggle. So I'm also looking for ideas of how else to kind of break through this status quo of not doing too much change in this whole process.
I'd love to cold call on somebody, David, if I could.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay. Because I think it'd be interesting. Disha with New Relic and Kevin with New Relic, you guys, I'd love to see if either of you had the opportunity to kind of weigh in, because Disha's leadership in the outcome delivery, and I believe Kevin's leadership in the outcome promise, it feels like that's where this alignment would need to occur, and just wondering how you guys are thinking about it as you think to bring more continuity.
Could I ask a question while we wait?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Hi, it's Mark Roberts from HP. So I guess what I'm thinking about is, as we look at this from like a customer journey map perspective, it feels like depending upon which person inside the customer org we're talking to, they have their own perspective about what the journey is and what the value prop is, right? So sometimes it feels like we may sell a service or solution, but depending upon who you ask, they'll give you a different answer as to what it's fixing or what its value prop is for you. So I guess and then I have other customers who are buying services from us, and their value statement or what it fixes for them has nothing to do with what we originally created it for, but they need it and it fills a void, right? And so I think the danger is thinking that we know everything that the customer needs. I've just had some interesting examples selling services on the HP side or in and around retail last year, not so much this year, but last year, where we were selling some services that if you would have asked me to try and go sell it to this customer in this fashion, I would have said no, because I don't think they need it. And I didn't understand their use case or what their problem was. So that's just kind of what I think this map, the map kind of varies for me depending upon who you're talking to and what the problem is.
Yeah, Mark, that was sort of the point of that bottom arrow that goes right to left. Which is, when this is, a well-oiled machine, you're getting voice of the customer back, on dimensions that makes sense. And so the golden thread is bilateral, because yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the best innovation happens in a very co-creative environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, figuring, it was never designed for that, but it's a great use case. And how do we actually amplify that or message that or tweak the offering a little bit to deliver that and find other customers that would value that? I think that's a great use case.
Yeah, we sort of struggle then to go back to the product manager and say, hey, I know you didn't build it for this, but like 3 companies just bought your service for something you didn't even consider. So, do we need to look at things differently? Sort of the feedback loop sometimes can be missing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Go ahead, Disha. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can hear me now?
Yep.
Thanks for the call out, Chad. I guess my microphone, Zoom wasn't picking up my microphone, but got it fixed finally. Like the mustache, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Disha. I didn't say that's the one thing I don't know if I've gotten it right or wrong yet, but it's it's in conjunction with COVID. It's maybe his tone deaf is sending out NPS surveys. I'm not sure yet.
Which element of value does it deliver? That's the most.
No, yeah, love the different look. Long hair, we don't visit barbers often, and beard, mustache, everything. All right. Actually, that has been the handoff has been a big initiative. I would want to say at New Relic that we've been working on. We've had a culture traditionally of really swarming. And so whenever there is an issue with any customers, like all of the groups just come together, whether it's, so I run customer success, so whether it's my CSMs or, on our, SA side, it's like the technical essays coming in, or, obviously sales is always in there, like account management. And so that swim lanes and divisions of roles is a lot of times go in that gray zone of who does what. As we are scaling and growing, that's become of paramount importance. I won't say we've nailed it, but we've really started putting a lot of focus on that division of roles between sales and customer success, and really defining those swim lanes, to like even the details, because sometimes you get it on the top, but that double click and kind of, as they say, devil's in the detail, gets harder when you want to implement at the field and the ground level. And then Chad, specifically on our value team, right, what we call the business value team, that Kevin and the team that uses the ecosystem product, that team again has been between, like, with pre-sales and post-sales and everywhere, and how and where the CSMs bring them in, and after they are done, like that handoff. So the CSMs who are the named account, named on accounts, they can kind of move forward with what they've started, like the good work they've started. That is again a very focal point, and we're putting together assets, integrating ecosystem with Gainsight. We just recently purchased Gainsight. So within the CSM workflows, we can have these specialty teams that come in, that just kind of helps with positioning business value to the customer, how that can become part of the CSM's day-to-day workflow. It's things we are working on, haven't nailed it completely, but that's definitely top of mind.
Yeah, Kevin here. Sorry, I was having problems as well with the audio. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So just to add on to that, I think that's an important point, that one of the things that we're focused on from the value team's perspective is spanning across that entire continuum and using the Eco IBC tool set to do that, and focus on not just the pre-sales efforts to get to yes and to articulate clearly the value for the customer, but then the value realization piece, and how do we connect that across our teams and make sure that we've got all of our folks engaged and aligned, and really melding in our different processes. So your tool has been very helpful in helping us bridge those process changes as we work with our customers. So, and just separately, a side note as it relates to COVID, it's rather interesting some of the questions I'm getting from the field asking me about my perspective from the office of the CFO and my experience on how to manage through a recession and what financial direction our customers are getting within the IT departments, and trying to really bifurcate value and price, because there's a real pull out of the value conversation in the most recent weeks to just core cash flow and liquidity, and how do they drive down short-term costs and cash outflows. And so how to bridge that and incorporate a value conversation and illustrate what substitutes for cost or what the total cost experience should be. So those are some interesting conversations, and specifically the Bain research is really helpful to help get back to a bigger picture and more strategic viewpoint.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing both those examples. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm going to do a teaser, and it's going to say this. We're going to talk a little bit about operationalizing the elements of value in the next question. And some of the things we wanted to get into were, where would you start? What handoffs would be critical to making that possible? What are the playbooks you might develop to drive tactical execution? Want to get into some of that and see how you might or how you are in fact doing it today. We're not going to have time to tackle those questions. And in fact, I don't have an answer. I don't think there is a single answer, but it's what we want to tackle in the work groups that are coming up. So we're going to tease you a little bit here with some of the discussion. And if you're interested and intrigued and you want to be part of defining the answers, make sure to sign up for the work groups that we're going to talk about at the end of this. So with that, maybe we jump to the next slide. And as a potential way to think about this from the strategic level, where do we get started? How do we take this concept of 40 elements of value and identify how we're performing versus how our customers would like us to be performing on those different elements of value? This strategy lays out a few steps that could be taken. Through survey format, we understand both the internal and the external perspective of how we're doing on the different elements of value versus how customers think we should be doing, and then translate that into the actual execution motions that we would do to improve or enhance elements of value that customers wanted more of, and downplay those activities or stop those activities where they weren't necessarily useful. Love thoughts from this group on, has anyone done this and how did it turn out? Or would anyone think this is a great thing to do, and how would you execute it inside of your company?
Hey, David, this is Steve Thompson with Value Lifecycle. And my question's to you and Jamie, because I've done some work with clients on this in the elements of value. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that gets in the way, and it kind of, to me, seemed to be the thread of the previous discussions, is as sellers, we organize our business around what customers pay for, which is the products and services. Okay, but from their vantage point, they're buying those elements of value, which are essentially, outcomes or lagging indicators. And to me, that's one of the biggest structural things that I found you got to overcome, whether you're in step 1 here or step 5. So let me pull back and just see if, Jamie, you've seen some of the same things.
I mean, it's a great question, sort of the bought versus sold. And, what popped to mind was Siebel. Siebel made a great business selling CRM software. Not a lot of, I don't think there were a lot of successful CRM outcomes in the 90s, right? So we sold the dream, but weren't able to deliver it. And look, most IT projects fail to meet their objectives, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole big stream of thought here. I guess a couple things I would say. the value that people buy on versus the value they stay on actually can be quite different, right? And I think getting a sense of that, you know, we see it lots of different industries, but you buy it for one thing, it kind of delivered that, but once it's in, it becomes really sticky because certain constituents they can't live without it, right? So sort of having clarity on what are the elements that'll drive the sale versus drive the renewal, you know, the quote-unquote renewal or whatever, you know, whatever the repeat purchase is. I think that's pretty important. I don't know. You know, the other thing we've seen is more outcome-based pricing or selling, basically. Like
contingency.
Bain, yeah, I mean, Bain, we're in that. We do a lot of that, right? So we'll do portions of fees at risk or things like that based on certain outcomes. And I think you'll see more of that happen. I mean, we're certainly in consulting, we're seeing that in Fortune 500 procurement. I mean, we're getting asked every time now, like, so what's your results? What are your results-based pricing approach? And they can add as much friction as benefit to the relationship, because you end up, you know, having this giant administrative headache on measuring something that there's no systematic way to measure. But you know, I do think the buying community is getting smarter on this and start gain sharing things and things like that. And so anyway, a couple streams of thought there. I'm not sure if it directly answered your question, but in the same zip code maybe.
Well, no, it did. And then back to David, I will tell you, in terms of starting, where I've seen the biggest success with clients is actually taking our offerings and mapping them to the particular elements of value first, okay, to ensure that you know, we've got a pretty clear idea of what it is we can potentially, okay, deliver to customers. And getting some clarity on that in both the marketing message and then in the selling motion. Okay, that's been kind of one of the first steps that I've seen is gotten some real good positive traction.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's astounding to me the lack of clarity that happens between product and sales. So I was literally working with a SaaS company last week, and there was this big debate of this: is this an enterprise product or a mid-market product? I'm like, folks, like, boy, that feels like a first principles question. And if we're not aligned on that one out of the gate, like, we're going to point the sales machine in the wrong direction. And, you know, it's not like this was new. This was something they've been selling for 3 years, right? So, you know, like, where are you targeting? What are you targeting? What's the value outcome? It sort of gets back to the golden thread, which is the idea of mapping it so that your CEO is aligned with what your strategy is, with what your product marketer is saying, with what your sellers are saying, with what your success people are delivering.
Jamie, were you listening into one of my calls and I just didn't know it, or? So,
yeah, I'm in a lot of places at once.
So. No, it's just I was laughing because we've had that conversation on our site. So what are we supposed to do though? Because I've been trying to figure out how to use. I have pursuit and then customer success, so sort of like pre-sales and customer success. So what's the way we drive the messaging, because we're touching the customers day in and day out, right? And so is there some sort of advice or approach that we should be taking to close the loop on the feedback all the way back up into the product managers and the marketing team?
Look, I mean, yeah, you need to buy a Bain consulting project. You know, building closed loop feedback, I mean, absolutely something we do. You said you were at HP, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, we're working with a big networking provider to build a closed loop system, right? So how do you systematically get feedback on product and service, and how do you filter that back in? And yeah, I mean, I think you know, in some ways, you know, just like the consumer world is way ahead on insight, you know, customer insight, they're also way ahead on closed loop feedback. And, you know, I mean, you can't walk out of a retail institution anymore without getting a survey. Now, we probably tilted too far in that regard. But you know, you'd be surprised at how few and far between systematic voice of the customer loops are in the business world, in the B2B world, right? Because I think the assumption is, well, my account exec will know, right? And the reality is your account exec doesn't know. Sometimes they do, right? They know when it's on fire and they get the phone call, but they don't always know the nuance or know
I
how
guess
to ask.
it feels like a quarterly exercise rather than a ongoing practice. Does that make sense? Like once a quarter you meet and then they give feedback and then they spend an hour and then they move on, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think getting, and getting some customers on panel and getting some quarterly is probably, start small, right? I mean, like the first way to fix win-loss where you have nothing is to go do 10 win-loss calls and then then make it 10 a month, right? I mean, that is what we're seeing as best practice, by the way, is sort of getting some system, get a drip of data coming in so that when you sit down quarterly, it's not like, okay, how do we do this again? It's like, okay, let's look at the data from last quarter.
Okay.
Fantastic, the conversation that sparked here towards the end of the call. I think it's going to be the hopefully the spark that comes into the work groups that continue. And I think they're going to be exciting discussions. I think we're going to continue to have these questions come up and have an opportunity as a community to try and solve them, to create some of the answers that each of us can use and go test. So high-level overview of what it is. The group would meet every 1 to 2 months. There's a give to get model in the essence that if you're active and engaged in this process, you're going to get the benefit of everyone else who's participating. We're sharing and winning together. And the goal is to develop playbooks that help us around both the strategic and the tactical level on an ongoing basis. So my ask is please reach out to Kocher if you'd like to participate. We'll get the groups going and we'll meet and have these types of discussions on a regular basis. Chad or Kocher, anything else you'd like to add here?
I just to thank the group. It's no surprise how engaged everyone was. Dave, you did a fantastic job facilitating. Jamie, thank you for all of your color and commentary and context on the Bain work. And this is the exciting next evolution of the community, that we can engage in these collaborative work groups. I love how Dave has kind of laid it out here. There is a give to get. If you participate, you're going to get a lot from it. And what we hear from the members all the time is maybe this is an element of value for the community, is that you can get some testing on assumptions, you can get some new thinking coming outside your organization and bring that back into the company. That's an exciting element that we have here with this collaborative work group. So as Dave said, please reach out to Kocher as a next step if you'd like to be considered in the work group, and we'll be excited to kind of put that in formation. Finally, I just want to make reference to, we have set up these chairs. Dave has role modeled what good and great looks like in terms of facilitating a session. We have another session coming up, which will be June 9th. That will be moderated and facilitated by the newly minted chair for value management, Eric Ranta, who runs the Cloud Value Advisor group for Google. Terrific company that is really in the throes of value realization and value selling. So Eric's going to be leading our session in June. And just like today's session, we'll tee up some ideas. We'll ask you to kind of weigh in, and then we'll set a rhythm and a cadence for ongoing communications. So with that, I'm going to wish everyone a great day. So thankful for the interactions and collaborations, and look forward to those signing up for the new work group. Thanks all.